representatives from Jesse So please welcome Jesse resident representative of IFC Philippines. Glad to have him. Very good. Thank you very much, Jesse. Hello? All right.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I have the infamous task of keeping you awake after lunch, so it's not the first time that I have to do this, so I'll try to keep this interesting and focus. I'd like to maybe talk a little bit about Philippines, the background. I understand this morning you already have Dr. Villegas. So I am no Dr. Villegas. I'm not an economist. I, like many working in the banking industry, have an MBA, but definitely no economist. But let me try to put it in layman's terms how we view the Philippines. So let me start with that. So, okay, Philippine situation. Good news. We have some of the highest GDP growth in this region. I mean, in this region where a lot depends on China, the slowing down of China has affected a number of the economies. Also, the US and the tapering effects, or the lessening of the tapering effects, have caused some chaos in some of our neighbors. But we seem to do pretty well in light of the situation, have some of the highest GDP growth. Remittances continues to be an important characteristic of the Philippine economy. We have a record 22.8 billion. We're the fourth largest recipient of remittances in the world, and I won't be surprised we eventually overtake Mexico and become the third largest, and makes us pretty unique as a country because we're the smallest among the four, the first being India and the second being China. Political stability, I think, as a democracy, we have been able to provide that, but under the Aquino administration, I think the strong leadership of President Aquino and his reform-minded cabinet, I think, has done a lot to help stabilize the image of the Philippines. And we've been rewarded by investment grade, 3 investment grade ratings from the rating agencies, the first time ever for us. So, indeed, a reward for macro stability thanks to this government. And by the way, we have also improved our ratings in other measures in the area of doing business, competitiveness, and most importantly, the corruption perception. Oops, what happened here? Uh-oh. Oh, sorry. Skip a slide there, but anyway, basically, just want to say a few things first. However, the growth that we have experienced is not inclusive, meaning that despite the high growth, and this is among the highest growth we've ever had in a while, we have not been able to reduce poverty. In fact, poverty is stubbornly stuck at 28%. It hasn't changed in 9 years. The poor has grown by 4 million in the 9-year period from 2003 to 2012. 40% of the population is below $2 per day. They're extremely, and for those who are slightly above the poverty level, they're extremely vulnerable to disasters and financial and price shocks. 44% of the population that are below the poverty line had, 44% of the population had fallen between the poverty line between 2006 and 2009. So when a disaster hits, our poverty rates shoot up. Now, the other thing is the job challenge. While we have high growth, we cannot generate enough jobs. That's why our underemployment is stubbornly above 20%. I think the latest figures indicate maybe 27%. Mainly because most of the jobs that we do have are actually low-paying jobs and not full-time jobs. And what we need to do is generate 14.6 million jobs in the next 4 years if we are going to help this population. So we have an interesting paradox. We have high growth, and normally, for most economists, the economic theory is we should trickle down to help the poor. Well, this is not making a dent on poverty, and it's not creating enough jobs. So we continue to have an exodus of our people to other countries. And thankfully, the remittances remain high, but this is not going to be sustainable. And we need to find ways to create more jobs for our people. So what are some of the causes? Well, lack of competition in our industries, complex regulation. It's a challenge in the Doing Business survey. We usually rank pretty low because getting a business permit is actually a staggering task because of the number of permits we need to get, and the fact is there's no just one place, you have to go to several places. Insecure property ownership, this talks a lot about the agricultural industry. We did agrarian reform, but the reality is we only did land distribution. So we gave land to the farmer, but that's all we did. And the farmer's land is insecure because it has a lot of attachments to it, and banks cannot use it as collateral because it's legally untenable. So the farmer with no money, no knowledge, has to borrow from the money lender, will charge exorbitant rates. And then, so instead of being poor or being a slave to the landowner, he becomes a slave to the money lender. So we have not helped with poverty, we have actually made it worse. So with so much land reform and the agricultural land being divided into small plots, we have then become extremely uncompetitive in agribusiness. And later on, I'll show you the effect on our competitiveness because of this. And the lack of public investments. Traditionally, in the Philippines, until recently, we have had not enough public resources because, frankly, we don't collect enough revenues. Our expenditures way outweigh our revenues, and therefore, for a long time, it's been very hard to contain our deficit. We used to struggle with 3%. Now, thankfully, under the Aquino administration, they've been able to have a much better handle on this, so that 2%, a handle, a deficit of 2% today is easy. Perhaps an indication of how much corruption there was before. So what does this all lead to? It leads to low agricultural productivity, weak manufacturing. Frankly, we don't have real manufacturing. It's interesting, most economies go from agriculture to manufacturing, services. We kind of skipped manufacturing, and then we just went straight to services. And the challenge with services, well, it's good to have, is for those, a lot of people in the services are in very low-paying jobs. Only very few are in areas like the BPO, which we are famous for, but nonetheless, the bulk, 75%, is really in these low-paying jobs. And so what are the outcomes? Inevitably, poverty is stuck. We're stuck at this high rate. There's a lot of informality in our economy. The outmigration continues and accelerates. And lack of private sector investments. Philippines continues to have a very low foreign direct investment, the lowest among the Southeast Asian country. So compared to our neighbors, I mean, we're pretty happy if we have 2 to 3 billion a year. Other countries, 10 billion is no big deal. And our big neighbor in the north, 100 billion is no big deal. So it's not like we're in an area where people don't invest and they do invest. We're just being ignored. Okay, on the competitiveness side, just to give you a sense, sorry, this chart is kind of busy, but we are trying to, what we did is we classified the different economies into factor-driven, wherein you use your main assets, which in this case is really your labor and your natural resources. And the second stage will be if your economy that's efficiency-driven. And then the final stage where we would like to be is the innovation-driven economy. Well, we're somewhere trying to go from 1 to 2. And if you look at the, the blue marks compared to the other economies, we're still a bit behind. So we have still quite a ways to go on the competitiveness side. Now, I mentioned agriculture. Because of our uncompetitiveness in the agricultural side, what's interesting was related also to agriculture is we have a inter-island shipping situation where it's quite expensive. We have 20 to 40% of agricultural goods sold in this country has logistics costs attached to it. That's pretty significant. Because we have this situation with land reform, a lot of the agri that we grow is very uncompetitive. So we have relatively high food costs relative to our neighbors. Now, that's why our minimum wage, if you take it and divide it by per capita income, we're the highest in East Asia. And this chart here is very interesting. Now, grant you the Philippines has different minimum wages depending on the region. Even with the lower one, the first red one here, we're still more expensive, relatively speaking, to Indonesia, Cambodia, even China, and even some of the Latin countries like Brazil, and even the United States. Right? Now, when you come to Manila and regions 3 and 4, it's even worse. Okay? Because of high food prices, relatively speaking, because our inefficiency of our agribusiness, that's why we have a high minimum wage. That's why we don't have manufacturing, because frankly, the relative high wages means it's very difficult for unskilled labor to get jobs. So I guess we just skipped it, right? So the key to solving this is finding a way to make our agribusiness, our agriculture more competitive. I already mentioned that it's not easy to do business. We're ranked 138 in 2013. Thankfully, we're now 108, so this is a bit dated. The Aquino government is really working hard to do this, and they would like to be in the sort of the, at least now we're in the middle third, and we would like to be in the top 1/3 before the administration is out in 2016. So they made quite a lot of strides. A lot of this has to do with the fact that permits are not just local in nature, they're national in nature as well. But ideally, as what has been done in most countries, and we are in this region, some of the best performers are like Singapore and Thailand. What they do is they coordinate so that you can just go to one place and get all the permits. Our challenge is that you can go to the local government to get your permits, but you still have national permits. So we are trying to find a way to coordinate this. And so there's been a lot of effort. So from 138, we went to 108 just this past year. So one of the biggest improvements ever in terms of places, and hope we can continue to improve so that we can actually attract businesses to come here. Now, infrastructure investments, I think everybody knows that traditionally this has been our weak point. In terms of absolute amounts, there have been a lot of effort to do that. So if you look at the chart here, the Philippine government has been trying to spend a lot more on infrastructure. But in this other chart, you can see we're still behind our neighbors like Malaysia and Thailand. We need to spend a lot more on infrastructure. They're also trying to do that through the PPPs. It's struggling a bit, but hopefully in the next few years it will accelerate, because I think Up to now, we have probably done 6, maybe 7, and hopefully we'll do a few more this year. So overall, poverty reduction is still very slow. You know, we're in a region that has done remarkably well in poverty. I mean, I just take the example of China. In the past 30 years has brought poverty from 84% to 16%. And our neighbors, many of them are in the teens, so we're still about 20, so we still got a long ways to go. And because of that, informality is pervasive, and 75% of our workers are informally employed. I know this has to do also with the way our labor policies are, but you know, it's a reflection of the way our economy is structured. So what happens is many of our best and brightest actually go abroad. So yes, we have very high remittances, but that also is a reflection of how poor this economy generates in terms of jobs. So what do we need? We need to find more inclusive growth jobs. We need to have the economy grow in sectors that will generate more jobs. So, and we need to find ways in which we can also improve the quality and the access to basic services. Again, this is through jobs. Health, education for our population, and then the infrastructure, power, water, and sanitation. In the creation of more jobs, some of the sectors that we need to look at, agriculture definitely is one of them, tourism is another, where I think you can then really generate jobs that stay at home and really employ a lot. And also, agri and tourism are in the rural areas where the bulk of the poverty is and the joblessness is as well. And we need to do something to attract more investments. There's talk about changing the constitution to allow foreigners to own, to open up more areas to foreign majority own. These things need to be taken into consideration. It's not enough that we focus on governance. Governance is important, and I think the Aquino administration has done very good on governance. But at the end of the day, people still need jobs. We need to attract businesses. This economy needs to grow even faster so that we can have enough jobs for our people. Let's keep in mind that we have the highest population growth in the region. We'll almost double everybody else. So yeah, it's nice to have so you can supply labor to the rest of the world, but frankly, that also puts a lot of burden on this government to actually help find this job and create the environment for job creation. So agriculture, I mentioned. Tourism is another way. We also need to find ways to help our SMEs, and this is in the area of access to finance. It's very interesting that we have a very liquid banking system here, but our access by the population is among the lowest, okay? In fact, private credit over GDP, we're among the lowest in Southeast Asia. So it's it's not like we don't have the money. We have the money. It's not just being brought up to the rest of the population. And then, of course, we need to continue to improve infrastructure. You all know about the power rates. We need to attract more power generation, roads, the whole gamut, because at the end of the day, we're not spending enough. Okay. So let me change the gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about the IFC, but I'm going to skip all this because I don't want to bore you with all this and just focus on the Philippines. We've been working in the Philippines for now over 60 years. Our first investments were in 1962. And what's interesting is that the first office of IFC outside of Washington was here in 1977. Okay, well, because Philippines was a good place to be at that time, and compared to our neighbors. And so yeah, and in fact, it was the regional office for Asia at that time. And we have done quite a bit on investments, particularly in the power sector in the 90s, and we continue to do that in 2000. We also have one thing we're not as known for is advice. And so we were involved in the privatization of MWSS, where we advised the government on the creation of what eventually were two companies, Manila Water and Manila. We can do investments in not just the dollar, we can do pesos as well. And by the way, we just moved to Fort Bonifacio about a year ago, and we have a LEEDs Gold Standard office. When I joined in 2000, we were 8. Today, we're more than 45, and we're continuing to grow because there's definitely a lot of opportunities here in the Philippines. Since our first investment in 62, we have put more than $3 billion into the country of our own money, and of course, we mobilize a lot more. Today, our portfolio is about $750 million. Most of that's in the power, followed by the financial sector. On the financial sector side, we invest in banks. So we are shareholders in banks like BDO and RCBC. And we continue to work also with rural banks. We are working with banks like PR Bank. And we are trying to work also on the area of financial access, which I think I've highlighted before is a bit of an issue here in this country. So on the infrastructure side, this is just some of the deals that we have done. So on the energy side, the Magat hydroelectric power are one of our largest hydroelectric facilities in the country. We assisted in the privatization of that. EDC, Philippines is number 2 in the world in geothermal use. And EDC is it was privatized in 2007. We were actually in EDC when it was still known as PNOC EDC, got involved in their IPO in 2006. And when it was privatized, we continued to engage with this company. And this company now is going abroad and going to places like Peru and Chile, bringing Philippine technology of geothermal into the other parts of the world. And we continue to support them. Manila Water, I think you know the story of Manila Water, a very successful e-zone operator, similar to EDC. They're also going to countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, and Myanmar, and we continue to support them in addition to supporting them here in the country. And then the Manila North Tollway was our first private toll road in the country, and been very successful, and now they are continuing to expand. I remember when this deal came out, there was a lot of concern that, because we were going to increase the toll 5 times, from 42 pesos to 210. And there was a lot of fear that people will protest and not pay. Well, it's working very well right now. In fact, the toll road did very well. Our loans were paid in 3 years. So much for that. But then, because of that, you have many opportunities for other private toll roads as well. We also do advisory services, as I mentioned. We have worked with the National Power Corporation, their Small Power Utilities Group, or known as SPUG, to bring private power to some of the islands, like the island of Masbate, for example. We also worked with rural electrification, so we worked with the electric co-ops and brought CAPEX funding proposal framework that's been approved by the ERC so that they can then learn to use that to access financing. And then we are involved in the current PPP program, the government. We are involved in the NAIA Expressway, which was successfully bid out last June. We are involved in the LRT, which we hope will be rebidded in April. And we are also involved in the port in Mindanao. So our support is no longer just lending, but it's also knowledge. And so advisory services is a new and a very important part of the IFC offering in the country. Financial markets, already mentioned, our investments, equity investments in key banks like Banco de Oro and RCBC. We also worked on distressed assets. Particularly, it's interesting, while banking situation is very good right now, it's actually a good time to clean out the balance sheet. So we find a lot of opportunities for banks who are taking the opportunity to actually clean out their balance sheets, and servicers who are willing to help in that regard, and so we're supporting that. I mentioned we're looking at thrift banks, rural banks, so PR Savings Bank is one bank that we have invested in. On the advisory side, we work with banks like CARD, which is the largest microfinance institution in the country. They're very successful. They have 1.8 million clients. Almost 99.9% are all women. And many of their clients are now SMEs. So we taught them about the technology of SMEs so that they can continue to serve their clients as they grow out of becoming microfinance clients. Another program we do with banks is we work with the sustainable energy finance area. You know, I noted earlier that banks, while very liquid, are not lending all of their money. And what we find, or we found, is that a bit of that's because lack of knowledge and also some concern with risk. So what we said is we introduce banks to the area of energy efficiency and renewable energy. And we found that given that, banks can be very successful. So we have worked with banks like BDO, like BPI, and they've been able to increase their lending, particularly in the energy efficient and renewable energy area. And therefore, and most of these, particularly in energy efficiency, are in the SME stage. So we help them expand their loan portfolio. Supporting that, we will take a percentage of their risk as well through a risk share facility. So knowledge together with some risk mitigation, we find is effective to help banks lend more in this country. And then we also work with banks in the risk management area. We have been working with BDO in the area of as they prepare for Basel III and, you know, dealing with things like credit and operational risks. Other sectors that we're involved in, we are involved in the health sector, so we have investments in Asian Hospital, Asian Eye. We are also involved in the education space with the Cravings Group, who are very big in the restaurant and hotel management area as well. An important area for tourism, an important job creation area because the students are not just working in the Philippines, but they also have opportunities to work abroad, particularly in other hotels and cruise ships as well. So that's our support. And we also have supported cyber parks like the Eastwood Cyber Park of Mega World. When they put up the first one over there in Libis, we supported them as well. On the advisory services side, we are working with banana growers in Mindanao. We were actually working with farmers. We wanted to test the fact, because people say, you know, we have agrarian reform, we have small farmers, so we're hopeless. Well, we wanted to test the theory that maybe with small farmers, smallholders, if we give them enough training and knowledge resources, can they be internationally certified? So we, in the Cavendish Banana World, that's Rainforest Alliance, so we worked with 4 smallholders, 1 single landowner and 3 cooperatives to test this theory. So we trained them. We got some Rainforest Alliance, by the way, is traditionally only done in Costa Rica, so only afforded by the big plantation owners who can afford to pay these auditors to come here. But we actually supported the creation of development of local auditors. And we worked with 4 of these, and the end result was very encouraging because 3 of the 4 got internationally certified, which tells me that if you are willing to spend the time and the resources with our smallholders, they actually can deliver internationally certified product and bananas. And of course, that's very important for us. We're the 2nd largest exporter of bananas in the world, 2nd only to Ecuador. So it's a very important industry for us, and it shows that the smallholder model can actually work. I mentioned the high inter-island shipping costs. So we're actually working with the DOTC, the PPA, and the Marina to try to find a way to reduce shipping costs. Because if it's 20 to 40% of our agricultural products sold in the country, it's way too much. And we're finding some interesting things that actually, if you maybe work a little bit with the IRR for some of these, you can actually enhance access of new entrants into the shipping world. And then, of course, the other thing we do is every year we, as part of the World Bank Group, we conduct the Doing Business Survey for the entire world. So we look at 185 countries, of which the Philippines is one. We also have teams here on the ground that help the Philippines try to improve its rating. So we work a lot with Bill Luz, who's the private sector representative of the National Competitive Council, on trying to improve the doing business. And so we're very encouraged by last year's result. We went from 138 to 108. We used to be the only